Hello, everyone, and welcome to the MFFL Nation Podcast. I am here today with Mike Curtis for episode 4 of the podcast. Mike, how's it going, man?
Doing great, man. Right here in the midst of training camp in the preseason. We're about to embark on a new season, NBA season, so I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it. I think this Mavs team is definitely going to be one of the teams to watch in the league this year, especially with the addition of Klay Thompson, but I'm excited.
And Mike, you are a Dallas Mavericks beat writer for the Dallas Morning News. Tell me how that experience has been like. You were previously with the Detroit Pistons, writing for the Detroit News, I believe. So what's that transition been like for you, and how are you liking Dallas?
Yeah, it's been great so far, man. I can't complain at all. I think the transition itself was a bit interesting, especially since I was going from covering the Pistons. For those who may not be familiar, they finished with the worst record in the league last year, had a 28-game losing streak, and then the last week of the regular season was my first week covering the Mavericks, who were at that point the 5th seed in the West. Then they made the run all the way to the NBA Finals, pretty much going on the road. From the Clippers to the OKC Thunder to the Minnesota Timberwolves, making it to the finals and coming up just a few games short. So it was definitely a crazy experience. One of the best things I'll ever probably remember from my career, but it's been fun so far. I really like Dallas.
And that's awesome to hear. And yeah, you mentioned that you transitioned from the Pistons to the Mavericks, and there was a pretty big differential in record and success when you speak about last season. And it's funny, you see guys like PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford, who came from the Charlotte Hornets and Wizards, who sort of had similar experiences where they get traded from the deadline from teams that were lottery teams, and they go to the NBA Finals a few months later. So I can only imagine what that experience was like for you. I'm sure it was a huge transition. But Mike, let's dive into some Mavs basketball. Firstly, you were with the Pistons before, and we've seen people all over social media discuss that there are some similarities between Cade Cunningham and Luka Dončić when it comes to similar paces, similar facilitating styles. What really stands out between those two players when you look at similarities?
Yeah, I think the main thing that stands out, and we hear the comparisons between Cade and Luka all the time. I can see it from a physical standpoint. They both have the same type of body. Both that big 6'6", 6'7" guard who pretty much can facilitate, rebound, score. So I think there are similarities when it comes to the physical, but their playing styles are completely different. I think Luka is a more intentful and more, I want to say, intentional scorer. So he's looking to put the ball in the basket at every chance he gets. Obviously, he can facilitate. He almost averaged a triple-double last year. So I think when it comes to that standpoint, there is a difference. I think Cade is really meticulous in getting his teammates involved, setting them up, and he's really proficient in the mid-range. That's his bread and butter. He obviously can attack the rim too. Not sure if you watched the Pistons preseason game the other night, but he was able to get a poster on the Phoenix Suns. So I think when it comes to just their skill sets, you can look at them and they can be identified as similar. There are a lot of different a lot of differences when it comes to their game. I think Cade pretty much, I think he's going to look to be more aggressive this season just because he's coming in fully healthy and he's ready to get that. I think he's ready to take that leap that a lot of people think he's capable of taking.
Right.
And then Luka, I think Luka's just entering his prime this year. This is going to be his 7th season. I think the only accolade he's missing at this point is MVP and a championship, which we both know those are things that he kind of wants. So I think those are, when we talk about Cade and Luka, that's what I'm thinking of.
And you bring up a good point, which also is a side question. But how do you think Tim Hardaway Jr. will fare into that system in Detroit, playing with Cade?
I think if he can knock down shots, he'll be great for that team. All of that team needed. They have a lot of playmakers, a lot of people that can handle the ball. They just needed someone to pass the ball to. They needed spacing. That's why they went and got Tobias Harris. That's why they went and got Malik Beasley. That's why Simone Fontecchio was there. But if Tim Hardaway can come in and knock down shots and provide that veteran leadership, I think that'll be a good fit for him.
1,000%. I agree. I am a Timmy fan, regardless of how he went out in Dallas last season. Big Timmy guy for sure. So I hope he thrives in Detroit. When you discussed that you've been around the Mavericks since last season, and obviously we're in training camp mode, we're in preseason mode. What have the vibes been like? You were obviously in Las Vegas for training camp, and I'm assuming you were at Mavs practice today. But just what has it been like being around the Mavs this year, this offseason? Is there good chemistry, does it seem like? Are the guys gelling well together? What have been your initial thoughts on the team so far?
Yeah, just came from shooting around earlier today. We spoke to Daniel Gafford afterwards, and he pretty much said the vibes are right where they should be as far as a team that's coming from the NBA Finals going into their season to kind of get back there. I think when you look at the gym, you see smiles, you see good chemistry. They're enjoying each other. They're still doing the half-court shooting competitions between the players and the assistant coaches, so that's kind of cool to see. They don't look like a team that's down or disappointed about the result of last season. I honestly think they thought it was a year of experience. The fact that they even got there, they know what it takes to get there, and they probably know what it takes now to finish the job. And when you bring in a guy like Klay Thompson, who for I think they think that, okay. For some reason, the stream went out on my end, but I think that they think that Klay is the piece that can get them over the hump. They're excited to play with him. I know a lot of fans are eager to see Klay Thompson play for the first time. It could be tonight. Jason Kidd talked before the last game against the Memphis Grizzlies that it's a good chance that him and Kyrie Irving will suit up tonight, for the rest of the preseason. So we'll see if that takes place today.
That will be very fun to see if we could get Klay and Kyrie out there, possibly even PJ, assuming that we probably won't see Luka Dončić tonight. I'm hoping Luka Dončić will be back for the next preseason game against the Los Angeles Clippers, because I would love to see a little Luka versus Derrick Jones Jr. matchup going on there. But when you talked about Klay Thompson, what not only your initial thoughts on him as someone that's been around him for the last few weeks, but also how do you see him fitting into the Mavs system? Obviously, I'm sure that we'll see the Mavs start setting more pin down screens, flare screens, and stuff like that. But when you talk about adding a debatably, I believe, top 3 shooter of all time, what do you think he brings to this Mavs team, and how do you think the Mavs will do with him?
Yeah, I think he brings 2 things, probably that the Mavs could have used in the finals last year or last season. One is shooting. Everyone knows how good of a shooter Klay Thompson is. He's only shot less than 40% twice in his NBA career, 13 seasons. That was these last 2 seasons coming off those 2 major leg injuries. I think when it comes to Klay, he's going to get a bunch of attention, not a bunch of attention, but a bunch of shots created off the attention that Luka and Kyrie gets on a nightly basis. I think those shots that Derrick Jones Jr. was getting in the corner, those shots that PJ Washington was getting in the corner, that he's definitely said he's going to work, he's worked on, and he's going to try to be a 40% 3-point shooter this year. But as far as Klay, he's going to get those wide open looks, and all he has to do is knock them down. I don't think anybody is expecting Klay Thompson to come in and score 60 points off 11 dribbles. I don't think they're looking to see that version of Klay. But as long as he can play consistently, as he has in the past, he averaged 18 points last year and shot 38% from 3. I think you'll take that every night if you're the Dallas Mavericks. And I think an underrated aspect of what he's going to bring that a lot of people aren't talking a lot about is his leadership. I think he's respected in this organization. I think the fact that he's been through the experiences that he's been through, he can kind of pass some of that knowledge down to the younger players on the team. We've seen him kind of take a mentor type of role with Quentin Grimes, where he's showing him tips on his technique and his form and how to get open and how to create more space. And Quentin is just listening to everything he says. He says he's talking his ear off during practice, just trying to get better. So I think his shooting and leadership are two things that he brings to this team.
Right, and you talk about leadership, and that's something huge when you look at this Mavericks team. Obviously, there is veteran leadership. We have Markieff Morris, Kyrie Irving, Luka Dončić is someone who you consider to now be a leader for the Mavericks. And then you bring in Klay Thompson. And with this young core of Mavericks, Klay not only being a leader for guys like Jaden Hardy, Quentin Grimes, Najee Marshall, PJ Washington, but that's someone that Luka can get advice from too as well. Klay has won 4 NBA championships. Kyrie Irving has won a championship. Markieff Morris has won a championship. So having those guys on your team that have had that experience before multiple times is going to be very beneficial for the Dallas Mavericks. And I think when you look at Klay and with him being in the system now, the shooting is an obvious major factor for the Dallas Mavericks team. But something that really stood out to me is we actually saw a clip, I believe it was yesterday, or no, it was 2 days ago. We saw a clip of Klay Thompson throwing a lob to Derek Lively in practice. And what really stuck out to me is I was actually on a podcast a few months ago with River Brown, and it was around the time of when the Klay Thompson acquisition was made. He discussed that Klay had really good chemistry with Trace Jackson Davis. And that's something that really stuck out to me, and that's something that we could really see this season is Klay being able to have good chemistry with Derek Lively. When Luka's not on the floor, it's a more fast-paced team, and Derek Lively being an athletic big that he is, that's someone that Klay Thompson can see running up the floor and facilitate to him. So that's something that's really stuck out to me. When you talk about the Mavs rotation, obviously Shams reported that Dante Exum is supposed to be out for around 3 months. Big time loss for the Dallas Mavericks, in my opinion. And you look at the point guard battle now, and Jaden Hardy has been someone that you can also play at the 2, same as Spencer Dinwiddie, but someone's going to have to take Exum's minutes. And from what you've seen so far, do you believe that Hardy will cover more of those minutes, or do you see Dinwiddie covering more of those minutes, or is that something that will be determined later on in the preseason?
Yeah, I think it's going to be determined throughout this preseason. If we look at the small sample size that we already have in the last game against the Memphis Grizzlies, they played alongside each other to start the game. Spencer Dinwiddie was doing most of the facilitating, most of the point guard responsibilities. Jaden Hardy was kind of the off-ball guard. And then as the game flowed and went on, Spencer kind of got a rest in the second half just so some of the younger guards can get some experience. And then it was time for Hardy to kind of do what he does. And he was able to get, I think he was around 21 points and 9 assists. So, and he made 6 threes, which is a career high for him in any NBA.
He was 6 for 10 from 3, and he was 0 for 6 for 2s.
Yeah, so we can see that he's been working on that shot, and it paid off in that game. But I think it's interesting when you think about it. Like, they both bring two similar skill sets. They both can score the ball. I think Dinwiddie is a little bit better on the defensive end, but I think it just depends on what you want. Dinwiddie's also familiar with this system, especially since he's been under Jason Kidd and been with the Mavs before. But Hardy is eager. He from everyone we've spoken to, he's ready for that opportunity to kind of get a bigger role in the rotation this season. And I think he's just going to embrace whatever comes to him. Yeah,
it's going to be very interesting to see. And, there's two sides of it. When you look at Spencer Dinwiddie in his time in Dallas, he was one of the highest career 3-point percentage shooters from the corner that Luka Dončić has ever played with. And that's something that's really crucial. And then you look at Jaden Hardy coming into preseason, having a great shooting game. So it's going to be interesting to see. And then there's the conversation of, can they still both get decent amount of minutes to where one of them is the backup point, one of them is the backup 2, and then you move Quentin Grimes to being Klay's backup 3 and Najee being the backup 4 for PJ. So it's going to be interesting to see, and we've discussed it a bunch on X, that Jason Kidd's going to have to make some legitimate decisions with how he controls this rotation. This is probably, which is going to lead to the next topic, this is probably the deepest team, in my opinion, in Dallas Mavericks franchise history. You look at the depth, that I believe that there's 13 to 14, probably 12 to 13 guys that could be getting legitimate minutes on an NBA team. And when you see that, and that's including Olivier Maximus Prosper. And when you see that, you have to make rough decisions. Not everyone's going to get the minutes that they want to have. And it'll be interesting to see how Kidd, Sweeney, and the rest of the coaching staff handles that, because this isn't going to be easy decisions.
Yeah, I agree. This team is deep. They got 2 to 3 players who can, like you said, be on the NBA rotation at pretty much every position. I think it's a good problem to have, but it's especially good when you have injuries like what happened to Dante Exum. That way you have 2 players who can kind of compete for that spot. And then, because going into it, you're going to have to disperse those minutes some way. And it seems as if Dante Exum was probably going to be the backup one just because of the versatility that he shows on both ends of the floor. I think he's one of the team's best on-ball defenders. So you lose that with his injury. But then you got to think about PJ Washington. We haven't seen much of him during the preseason. I'm interested to see if he'll play at all in these next 3 games. But if not, you got a guy like Najee Marshall, who I think that's who I've been most impressed by so far in preseason, just because of the way he's able to kind of handle the ball. I don't think I saw a lot of that in New Orleans. And I think the way that he's able to shoot, he didn't show it particularly in this preseason game, but he's a really good corner 3-point shooter. And if he can kind of take advantage of those open looks that he's going to get because of all the defensive attention to all the other 3 stars, I think he'll be really good for this team. And not to mention what he brings defensively. I mean, that's who they brought in to be their replacement for Derrick Jones Jr. But I think he's going to show a little bit more on the offensive end.
Right. And you say that it's Derrick Jones Jr.'s replacement. And I think one thing that the Mavs fans are referring to a lot as this not being an upgrade or him not being at the same level as Derrick Jones Jr. And I'm on the opposite end of that. I believe that this is a legitimate upgrade from Derrick Jones Jr. I believe that Najee Marshall, the system and the team that he was on previously with the New Orleans Pelicans, it didn't allow him to show his full offensive potential. Defensively, that's someone who's a more bulkier build than Derrick Jones Jr. So obviously the speed and athleticism is a little bit of a downgrade in a way. But when you look at the offensive side of things, I mean, he just came off a career year from 3-point shot percentage, and also just being able to create his own shot. We saw a little snippet of it in their preseason opener, being able to attack the basket, got an and one on Zach Edey. We saw the floater in the middle of the paint. So those are things that stick out to me about Najee, and that's someone who's going to be, I could see a similarity to where, yes, he'll be on the floor sometimes with PJ Washington, but I could see that to where Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford are swapping minutes. We can see that with PJ and Najee at some points too, which leads to Olivier Maximus Prosper, someone who reportedly has been working very hard this offseason. I had the pleasure of interviewing Terry Sullivan, general manager of the Texas Legends, and he also spoke very highly of Olivier Maximus Prosper, his work ethic and everything like that. And so when you look at Omax, do you see there being a chance, if this Mavs team is healthy, obviously if there's injuries and stuff like that, I could see him obviously getting minutes, but if this Mavs team is healthy, do you see him in the rotation at all this year?
I think there's a chance that we could see him somewhere down the line. I'm not sure if it happens initially, because they're probably going to want to get a set rotation of the guys that they know they want to involve on a nightly basis. I think Omax has a lot of potential. Just on both ends of the floor. I think that's the role that see him in this year. When he comes in the game, perimeter guys on the other end. So I think as long as he's able to do that, if he's able to rebound, and if he's able to kind of take advantage of that athleticism that he has, that he'll be in a good spot. But I think it's a good chance that we see him somewhere down the line in a rotation.
Yeah, it will be nice. And I'm hoping we get Omax minutes. And, with Maxi Kleber, who's slowly starting to age a little bit more and has been developing injuries recently. I'm not sure on the status of his health right now. I'm not sure if he's playing tonight. I'm assuming he's not. I don't know if you've gotten any word on that yet. But with someone like Maxey, who's starting to get older, and you have a guy, Max Prosper, in his second year, the Mavs may look at that as someone that they want to start developing for when that time for Maxey comes retirement-wise, and have Max ready to fill in for that slot. I do think that when Maxey is healthy, he has the upper hand right now, just experience-wise, in legit games, playoff games. The shooting is better. Defensively, I will take Max right now, but the offensive side definitely has to improve. Mike, my final question for you. I don't think you've even been for Dallas for a whole year yet, but since you've made the move to Dallas, what are your top 3 favorite restaurants in Dallas? And have you had Texas barbecue?
I have. I have had a couple of different restaurants. And I'm glad that you prepared me for this question because I have an entire list for you. I can only pick 3, but for barbecue, I'm gonna go with Hutchins.
Okay.
Barbecue Frisco. I took one of my guys from Saginaw. He came to visit. And I took him there, and it was amazing. So I'm gonna go with Hutchins for sure. I really like Leo's. It's a brunch spot in Little Elm. So I'm gonna say that for brunch. And then okay. Let me think. Breakfast Brothers is another good breakfast spot.
Yes.
They have locations, but there's one close to Duncanville that I really enjoyed. So I'm gonna choose those.
Nice. Okay, I like it. Breakfast Brothers is really good. I've had it before. Very cool, man. Mike, again, thank you so much for coming on to this episode. We really appreciate it. Lastly, man, shout out your pages, shout out where people can find your articles and everything like that. Obviously, you provide great work about the Mavericks, so would love for the fans to be able to see and hear about that.
Yeah, definitely. You can read all of my work and the work of my colleague, Brad Townsend, who does a phenomenal job at the DMN at dallasnews.com. Subscribe. And then I'm on social media, Twitter at Mike A. Curtis too.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you again for coming on to the episode. We really appreciate it. Big Mavs season coming up, and we cannot wait. Obviously, you provide some of the best news, reports, and opinions about the Mavs as well. So thank you again for coming on the show, and we'll keep in touch, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mason.
Of course.